Hello, soul travelers. I'm so grateful you're here. I am Janae of Living Truth, and this channel was created to hold space for honest conversations about death, fear, grief, love, and the mystery of what it means to be human. Whether you arrived here searching for comfort, curiosity, or understanding, I hope you leave feeling a little less alone. Let's begin. Hello, my soul travelers, and welcome to another episode of Death Stories Living Truth. Today's story is brought to you by At Spiritual Warrior Journey
Hospital, and all of the blood workup. They came in and just said, "It's gastritis. Go home." And I was so disappointed because they didn't give me anything for nausea. They didn't give me anything for pain. I would describe that on a pain level of 0 to 10, it was a 27. I was just in really, really severe pain. The following evening, as I was laying in bed, I was very restless because I was in a lot of pain, and I could see a warm glow appearing in my room. And I was observant, just watching with curiosity that this warm glow was in my room. And suddenly I was no longer in my body, but at the foot of my bed looking at my body. In 2004, I was pregnant with my youngest child. I was 11 weeks pregnant with my youngest child, and my husband and I, we had a perfect morning, a really lovely time. We had a 1-year-old that just had turned a year old, and we woke up that morning wanting to get her pictures taken as her 1-year benchmark. We had that, and then we went to lunch, had a lovely time, and we went into the office to work. At the time, my husband was a former medical doctor. He was a former OBGYN. He was the first laparoscopic surgeon in the state of Utah. He had a lot of medical background, but due to some circumstances where he developed a malignant melanoma and was given 6 weeks to live. He had 4 lesions on his spine and 3 on his brain. And the prognosis was 6 weeks to live for him years earlier. And rather than surrendering to big pharma and the medical industry, even though he was very much in that medical industry, he took the spiritual route and went into prayer and said, "God, direct me. How am I going to heal this?" And he, in prayer, was given the message of Dr. Hulda Clark, who is well known for writing the book, The Cure for All Cancers. She actually left the United States because she was teaching about parasite cleanses and detoxes and things for cancer. So rather than dying 6 weeks later, he lost 40 pounds. He had greater vitality. He looked and felt better than ever. And so all of his patients and staff were just like, "What are you doing?" And it led him out of the big medical industry and more into a holistic point of view. And so he was supporting his patients from an alternative. 6 U.S. Marshals entered our office and arrested my husband in front of me for a crime, and arrested him for a crime he didn't commit. What they arrested him for was medical billing fraud. And in my brain, I was thinking, that's an open and shut case. That's so easy to prove because HIPAA will show all billing codes and how often things are billed through insurance. It's not a big deal. We just get this dialed in. Well, shortly after that, he ended up being arrested and put in prison for this. And
That is so sad. I cannot believe, because this man found another way to heal people, a way that's been used for thousands of years, a civilization that's older than America, have been healing people this way. Obviously, there's something to it, but because they're so afraid, they arrest this man. I can't even believe it.
The experience was very, very traumatic, to say the least. and he was in prison for 5 months. They scheduled, the Fed, from a federal standpoint, they have unlimited resources and unlimited manpower. And so anybody who's been in the system can say that it's a very, very challenging experience. So he was released miraculously after 5 months, and charged $280,000 in fees and fines, and it was just a very grueling experience. So it was a very different dynamic, and part of that agreement with the federal government was that he could no longer practice medicine anytime in the country for the rest of his life. And so there were a number of elements that made it very challenging, and the trauma of that, being pregnant and having my husband taken in front of me, and then just the years of fighting the system for so many years caused a tremendous amount of stress to my body. So by the time I was in 2012, my cortisol level was off the charts. I lived in a constant state of fight or flight, severely complex PTSD, and our lives were very challenging, just trying to overcome the immense trauma of that. So fast forward to 2012, we went to Peru. We did an ayahuasca ceremony in July of that year, and I got violently ill through the experience, and most definitely should have been in the hospital, but we didn't go to the hospital. And I never fully recovered from that. I just my body continued to break down, chronic nausea, muscle tension, couldn't sleep, just the very classic signs of somebody who's living in a very maladaptive stress state. And
that's so true. It's so dangerous to live in a state that's so stressful. I do believe that stress is what causes disease, all kinds of disease, cancer, everything, all depression, everything.
I started having a lot of shaking in my body. I was shaking a lot. My nervous system was shaking all of the time, and it was very visible shaking. On December 16th of that year, I hadn't been able to keep anything down for a number of weeks. I was losing weight. I felt like my skin was just hanging off of me, and I was in chronic pain, chronic nausea, and I just genuinely was concerned that something was happening. I pled with my husband to please take me to the emergency room, because I genuinely thought I was going to die. And after they ran a bunch of blood work and they ran a bunch of tests, I don't know if they assumed that I was there as an addict or trying to abuse the system, but I wasn't treated well. There was just very little sympathy, and my body was having these massive convulsions. So I was shaking and having these severe muscle spasms in my body that I couldn't control. But after many hours of being at the hospital and all of the blood work up, they came in and just said, it's gastritis, go home. The following evening, as I was laying in bed at 6:52 p.m., I was very restless because I was in a lot of pain, and I could see a warm glow appearing in my room. And I was observant, just watching with curiosity that this warm glow was in my room. And suddenly I was no longer in my body, but at the foot of my bed looking at my body. And I could see that my face was held in a very contorted pain state. And my hair was very disheveled about restlessness on the pillow. The brown comforter that was up against me. I had a heating pad and flannel pajamas and warm socks and 3 comforters on me, and I still felt like I was in a meat locker. So all of these signs were that there was a lot going on in my body, and I had immediate compassion for that version of me that was laying in that bed. And looked over at the clock, and I don't know if I instinctively do this as a mother, because I always needed to know how much, when my child need me. and I saw that it was 6:52. At that time, I heard my husband laughing down the hall as he was watching television with our young girls, who were 7 and 9 at the time. And I didn't walk to that other area of the house. Immediately, I was just in that room on the other side of the home. And I was very, very aware of what was going on. I was aware that they had no knowledge of me there, but I could sense everything that they were feeling. And I had this deep love for my family, and I certainly wanted to be with them. And I also...
That's really interesting. It sounds to me like she's outside of her body already. She has already exited her body, her physical body, and into now spiritual form, and is watching her family and just loving them.
I had this annoyance because my children at 7 and 8, 9, and my husband was watching The Simpsons, and I felt like that was too advanced for their age. So out of my body, I still had that annoyance. Like, why are you letting our children watch this show? And so in that observation of watching my children in the living room with my husband, suddenly everything just blurred out, and I was standing at the top of this long pathway. And in that, I saw my family. My husband was sitting on this large boulder at the top of this pathway. Our young daughter, the youngest, was in his lap, and I could see our children around, and I locked my eyes with my husband first. I saw tears streaming down his face, and all he said was, "It's okay, babe, I'll be okay." And I was so confused because I was thinking, okay, with what? I'm not okay. Where are we? What is happening? I'm not okay. So I turned my attention to my oldest daughter, who was 15 at the time. And she, as I looked at her, she said, "It's okay, Mom. I'll be okay too." And then moved on to my next daughter, and then my son. And each one of them just nodded and said, "We'll be okay." Until I got to my youngest daughter, who was in her father's lap. The one that was a year old when he was taken, she was crying and just like, "I love you, Mommy. I love you, Mommy, but I'll be okay." And that was very distressing for me. And then I got to my youngest, and she was just frozen in it, and she just buried her head in her father's chest. And as I'm witnessing all of this, I didn't have any control over the environment that was taking place, and there was a pull away from my family. I was moving off that trail, moving further down that trail, although I wasn't walking on that trail. And further along what were my parents and all of my siblings. I saw them. I locked eyes with my mother. She didn't plead for me. She just said, "I love you, but we'll be okay." My parents were standing together. They had a good relationship. They had been divorced since I was 9. But all of my family was present there. And beyond them were all of my extended family and friends and acquaintances, but they were further off the path. So as I was witnessing all of this, I was very confused that nobody was begging me to stay. Nobody was explaining anything that was taking place. They all just collectively said, "It's okay, we'll be okay." And in front of me at the end of this pathway was this large, almost like a Hollywood version of a haunted mansion. There was this dilapidated building. The wrought iron fence in the front was broken. The gate was broken. There were spires on the roof. There were black ravens on the roof. The shingles were hanging off the thing. Everything was very dilapidated. I saw that there was a tree in the yard that was dead. The grass was dead. The bushes by the front gate were dead. Yeah, everything was yellow and very dilapidated. And I, by nature, stay away from anything haunted mansion. I never go to anything Halloween-like because it always dysregulates my nervous system. Although I didn't have any fear, I was just more observing as I was moving through this. And as I was moving through this, I stepped through the threshold of that gate. And as soon as I went through the gate, everything instantaneously adjusted. The wrought iron gate turned into this beautiful white picket fence. The spires on the roof turned into this beautiful golden dome. The black ravens turned into white doves. The home, it turned into this beautiful, beautiful crystal-like building. And everything became alive, and I could feel and sense every blade of grass. I could sense the music of life, and everything was green and lush, and flowers were blooming. It was very, very beautiful, and there was a resonance of love coming from the building and every aspect of the yard. And so as I was in this space, I entered the front and entered through the entry of the building. And as I did so, there were three beings who met me at the entrance. And there wasn't a lot that I could discern one from another. They looked asexual. They were just these illuminated entities.
Yeah, and I've heard that a few times, that when people are in their spirit form, you don't have a body. So you're not male or female. You're just a spirit. You're asexual, just like she said. You're not male or female. It doesn't matter. There's no procreating when you're a spirit. You don't create more spirits. Like, that's just not what you do. So being a woman or a man here on planet Earth has a purpose, but as a spirit, it doesn't. So just like people say God is the man, like, I don't believe that. I believe God is energy, and energy is not male nor female.
Very beautiful and bright. And they met me at the entrance and told me that they started to explain what was taking place. And so they told me that I had left my body due to severe trauma, that there are many layers to the physical body, and that this layer of the physical body was coming back home, and that I was still attached to my physical body at home via the cord of life, and that had not been severed yet. And they also explained that the pathway was my soul's representation of my journey home, and that no one asked me to stay because their consciousness was not prepared for me to leave. And that everyone that was shown to me were all as a visual reminder of my impact on the people around me. And so as they're explaining all of this information, three more entities stepped into the room. One of them was carrying a large bowl of crystal water, and with a soft crystal sponge. And the other two entered, and as they did, my physical form dropped off of me, and I could see my physical body that looked exactly like it did when I was in bed, drop to the floor, much like a crumpled up outfit that you wore the day before, just without any form or structure. And that was really unusual, to see my body without it.
That is so fascinating. As many NDEs as I've listened to, I have never heard anything like that. So just like how some people call our bodies our meat suit, that is kind of exactly what she's explaining. Like, she was comfortable enough to let go of her meat suit and just be in her spiritual form. Like, that's wild.
Any form or structure, just onto the floor. So those other two beings picked up my body and gently held it, as the other one was using the soft crystal sponge to wash over that body. And they were explaining that this aspect of my body was severely damaged. This was the emotional aspect that was severely damaged due to trauma. And so they were working on healing me at that time. Then when that was complete, they moved me forward to an area where there were three large statues that were approximately 15 feet tall. They were all adorned with precious gems and gold. And the first one was the most illuminated. It was the brightest and had the most gems. And there were three right in a row. And we went to the first one. they had shown this one to me, and they said I was being given 3 gifts, and the first one was the gift of sight. And as they told me that, I knew that that represented the first statue. And instantaneously, the gift of sight appeared as if there were hundreds of videos that were playing around me. So I didn't have the typical life review that other people have. All of the videos that were shown to me were videos showing me how each member of my family was going to live their life without me. And as I watched all of those, I was aware of the times where my mother and sister invited my husband to go and be with them, and he alienated himself, isolated himself from family because of the pain of my loss. I saw that my daughters would all climb in bed and talk about me and cry and laugh, and ultimately I saw that eventually, although it was very painful to have the loss, they were in fact eventually okay. I also need to note that behind these statues was a darkened hallway, and I was told that if I were going to cross through that threshold, that there would be no returning. And I know that that's also a common thing in a near-death experience, that there's always going to be some break of what once you cross, there's no going back. So they cautioned me of that. I never saw what the other 2 statues represented, but when they showed these videos to me, one of them stood out, was showing my youngest daughter, and showed that she developed a lot of developmental delays, and actually had the trauma of losing me would cause her to become mute temporarily, and she would struggle immensely mentally and emotionally. And seeing that.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't imagine that. Like, that poor baby, because first her dad went to prison, excuse me, for 5 years for something he didn't even do, and then her mother just disappears, is just gone. Like, no wonder the poor baby would go mute.
It's very disturbing to me. And so they explained to me that I was an integral part of her life path, and that if I crossed over, that she would not complete her destiny in this lifetime. And so I responded, I have to go back then, so he needs me. And in that second, I was immediately back into my body and back in an enormous amount of pain. And the light slowly dissipated out of the room. And once again, I saw that 8 minutes had passed. And at that point, I just started praying, and I kept touching my body to feel like I'm back in my body. And I started to be in prayer and said, God, please let me live. I need to live, and I need to do whatever I can to heal. I also knew that my husband was going to bring the children in shortly for a prayer that before he was going to put them to bed. It was a ritual that as I was being bedbound, that was what was going to take place. So my husband shortly, probably about 45 minutes later, brought the children in, and so my youngest was at the up at my head, and then she was 7, our 9-year-old was next to her, and then my husband, and he held my hand, and he said a prayer asking for my healing and asking for protection of our family, and the basic things that we pray for. And when he finished that prayer, my sweet little girl leaned into my ear, and she whispered, I need you, Mommy. And it was such a beautiful confirmation that moments earlier I was told that on the other side. And I wanted to respond. I wanted to respond and say, I know I'm here for you, and I promise to never leave. But I was so weak that I didn't even have a voice to even respond. So the only way I could respond was allowing the tears to pool in my ears as they stream out of my eyes, and I just quietly cried. and it built up a determination for me to heal. Unfortunately, I was bedbound for another 8 months, and it was a very, very long, painful journey. My typical day, I would wake up each morning thinking, "Oh, finally today, I can lean into healing." But it wasn't the case. On average, I started violently shaking about 10 a.m. every morning, and that would last about 8 to 10 hours every single day. So I would describe even my eyelashes ached. I was in so much pain. I was very weak.
I could not imagine. Like, could you imagine? That's like something to remember. That's why we watch videos like this, because you are never grateful for waking up without pain if you've never experienced it. But listening to somebody else who has will make you be grateful for waking up without pain. This poor woman, oh my gosh, from 10 o'clock in the morning until the night, like she was just in excruciating pain. I couldn't imagine that. So yeah, I'm sure now that she's through this, she's probably grateful every single day that she wakes up without pain, and nothing else matters. Like, what else matters? What this celebrity did or that celebrity did, what the president said, what the president didn't say, like none of that matters. The fact that I'm awake and alive without pain is the only important thing. And I believe that is living. That's why these videos are important. So they can remind us who we are, that we are humans and we're only here for a short while. And we need to appreciate and be grateful and learn as much as we can while we're here and stop being so distracted by things that don't even matter.
We tried many different modalities to start the healing process. And I learned a lot through all of that, and ultimately ended up writing my book, The Secret to Healing and Recovery, knowing that I'm not alone, that there are many people on the healing journey and many people looking for answers that they can't find in the medical community. And I'm not making the medical world wrong. For acute care, it's a fantastic thing, and there's modern science that is amazing. In fact, 2 weeks ago, modern science saved my mother's life, and she ended up having a quadruple bypass. And my mom is alive today because of the technology. But I also know that when there has been a severe trauma or a lot of PTSD, that the emotional state of the body and the stress of the body really takes a hit. And I'm a strong believer that when you have a physical trauma, that you begin to have a spiritual awakening as an opportunity, because you can't have a physical experience without a spiritual experience on its heels. And often that is looked at as the dark night of the soul. There's opportunity in these challenges for sure, and it's been a very, very long journey. But my purpose in writing my book is along the lines knowing that ultimately everything in our path is up for us to we can learn through immense challenges, or we can learn through observation. Ultimately, our healing is up to us too. There's fantastic medical doctors and naturopaths and Chinese medicine and homeopaths and acupuncture, and all of these different things are fantastic. But the consciousness of the individual has to be within, and the growth and the learning and the implementation has to be within. And so I started with the baseline of just rebuilding my gut, knowing that that was going to be primary, is by healing the gut. It's the central point for all healing. And so I would, during that time, I became violently reactive to over 500 foods. So my food was very limited. My gut had been so pulverized with all the severe vomiting and the reactions. And so I was very, very limited of what I could eat anyway. And so that's why I had to just start at ground zero. And so I researched traditional food preparation and bone broth. And so bone broth happened to be the most supportive nutritional aspect for my healing, knowing that it's the most bioavailable, nutrient-dense food with the amino acids that are very supportive for the gut lining. So that's how I started rebuilding my gut. I implemented essential oils, and I want to put a caveat, very pure essential oil, not synthetic or not adulterated, which is most on the market are adulterated. But using essential oils for the brain and body regulation, for the nervous system, for emotional regulation and healing. And then I implemented a number of other modalities that I wrote about in my book that are all self-directed. So everything that I wrote about are opportunities for someone to take the healing wheel back into their own hands and utilize the techniques. And then I also have a section of that book for a caregiver's guide for people who have a loved one who is on a healing journey as well.
Well, Vicky, you've been through so much. I don't think anybody would want to walk in your shoes.
Yes, especially this last year and a half.
Yes, especially.
Yes.
It's interesting. I had actually one of the comments, people responded that, what is it with the grass? Why do people mention the grass in heaven? What do you think it was about the grass? Because you also mentioned that you could see every blade of grass. Is it that it's conscious? Or is it just that something we take for granted here that is actually more than that? What do you think it is?
I feel that I'm also a past life regression therapist. And so I've had clients for many, many, many years, taking them through past lives and taking them through the death experience, and also going to the spirit realm through guided imagery. Through everything that I've learned in my own sessions, plus my near-death experience, there are key elements that are universal that I see almost every single time in a regression. Those will be large marble buildings. There will always be pillars. There will be a lot of busy people. There's a lot of activity, and there's a lot of things in nature. And I think the blades of grass is definitely a representative of that, as above, so below. That earth. That this earth is maybe a holographic version of what's in the spirit realm, in the heavenly realms. I think, I don't know specifically why grass itself, although that was very, very clear with me. And I know that, but I absolutely know that there are waterfalls and streams and mountains and trees and grass and all of the roses and flowers. All of that is very much in the spirit realm as much as in the physical realm.
It reminds me of the movie Avatar, where they've got those beautiful, different colored islands and floating in the clouds. It's just magic.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think the mansion was a reflection of your inner state before it changed and became the love? So it was almost like you walking into heaven?
I actually feel like that there's conversations and some teachings about Bordeaux, and which is the in-between state between the physical and the spiritual realm, or we could look at it as the fourth density. We obviously live in this 3D, in the third density. It's often referred to the spirit realm as in the fifth density. And so I feel like that journey was the crossing over from the various levels of density. And so I think as I was seeing that, that can appear as a not necessarily a loving place. It can be a very confusing place. I feel like what I've understood is that a lot of souls can get stuck in that level, especially if they have a lot of addiction in their physical life.
That makes sense. It's kind of like the in-between, like a waiting room, where you're deciding where, like, your spirit is either getting ready to continue on as a spirit in spirit form, or to return back to 3D form. Like, it's in between. And like she said, if you're having a lot of addiction and a lot of turmoil in your head and confusion, and you wind up in this in-between space, it's going to be really hard for you to hear your angels and to hear spirit and to be able to feel and see what's going on, and to be able to make that decision if you want to return to the 3D world, or if you're ready to continue your experience as a spirit.
Or if they have a lot of cravings that, and they lived a very lustful life and a lot of earthbound density, they can potentially be stuck in that. And so my representation of that journey home was also a level of frequency or vibration. And watching that was just in that transition into the higher realms.
Would that be so similar to, that would be the astral plane, right? Bordeaux level. Okay. And that's kind of like around Earth, and then there's the higher realms around that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the 3 statues, but you also mentioned 3 beings, and there were 3 beings before that. Is there something significant with the number 3?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've been very acutely aware that there were sets of 3 with everything, and to be honest, I don't know. It wasn't ever conveyed, but I did notice that there were 3 beings initially, 3 additional beings who came in, and then the 3 statues for sure. And once again, I only was told, they also were telling me I was being given 3 gifts. And so they only revealed the first one as the gift of sight. And that it's been kind of curious to me as well as I've thought about it and reflected. I don't have that answer.
Well, apparently it's a power number, so there will definitely be, and there were 3 sets of 3. Yeah. You mentioned that your body dropped and they were healing it with a crystal sponge, and it was your emotional body. So when you came back, was your emotional body a little bit more healed, and then your physical body had to catch up?
Possibly. I don't know that it was I don't know that it was as dramatic as an absolute, that it was very damaged and then very healed, like an instantaneous healing per se. But I think that they got it to a point where I could start the healing journey. The intensity of all of the trauma that was almost too much for me to trudge through, that they were removing some of that to a point where I had the resiliency and the capacity to start my quest for healing.
Yeah, because I know we have different layers in our auric field, and the physical layer is like closest one to our body, and then you get the other layers. So if your emotional layer is healed, it allows the physical, but it makes sense, because if they maybe healed it completely, there would have been too much dissonance. It wouldn't heal properly. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's the mental and the emotional and the astral and the causal body. Like, I know there's many layers to that for sure. And that just happened to be the one that was conveyed to me. But the emotional body is definitely, and the mental and the emotional bodies are the 2 that can become the most damaged. And those, in quantum physics, those will show in Trillian photography, or they'll show in anybody who can look into that much more before it'll show up in the field way before it'll show up in the physical body. And so we try to when once it gets as a symptom or a physical illness or something, that's kind of like the last stop of the experience, but it had probably been in the field years before, or at least 6 months to a year prior to that, and manifest. So, from a quantum standpoint, energy to matter. And when we try to heal things, we try to heal ourselves from the physical level first, working matter to matter. But new science indicates that working on the energy first is going to be the most.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because what caused your illness was emotional trauma. It wasn't physical.
Correct.
Yeah. And by the time it hits the physical, it's probably already so deeply ingrained. You've got to then work from the physical out again. Yeah. So you mentioned that you started getting better. Did you speak to anyone about it? Were you able to speak about what had happened? Did you realize that it was
experience? I did know that it was a near. I mean, there was no question to me what had taken place. I didn't question it at all. So at this point, when I had that near-death experience, I was so weak that speaking was very challenging. One thing that I was very much aware of, that how much energy it takes to use physical language. And I think that's why the spirit realm doesn't waste their time with language. It's just, it's a transfer of thought. We just know it uses a lot of energy to talk. And to the magnitude of what took place, I remember that the next morning, as I could, I wrote down notes and I wrote down the experience, and I had a journal next to me, and I would journal what I could, and even that took a lot of my energy. But it was probably about 2 weeks before I had enough strength to convey the message to my husband. I didn't want to frighten anybody. But one night he was in bed next to me, and anybody who's been in a loving marriage knows that pillow talk is a very intimate and personal time, and it felt like it was the right time to convey that message and to share everything that took place. He was obviously very startled and saddened that I had to go through that experience, but in complete awe and wonder as I conveyed all of the details, and it was very, very fresh to me. And so I shared that with him, and as I began to heal and having opportunity, I began to share with various family members, and my children I didn't share until I was much further on the healing journey, because I didn't want to frighten them. But I shared as I could, and when the audience felt appropriate to do so.
That is really amazing, because most people who have near-death experiences, nobody believes them, or they don't feel safe enough to even attempt to tell somebody, because they just don't believe that they would believe them. And for her husband to be a doctor, a medical doctor, an American, or I guess that's what you call it, not American, just an American doctor, a Western doctor, that's what I'm looking for, a Western doctor. And for him to be open to a near-death experience is a big deal.
Do you think, they call them mystery illnesses, but things like chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia also fall into that spectrum?
Yeah. I remember, my way to respond to that is, I remember being in middle school and in like a health class and talking about the dangers of stress. And I remember this headline on this book that I had that says stress kills. And that just seemed so silly to me, because I thought, how is stress going to kill somebody? It didn't make sense to me at all. But I really do understand that there's the brain. So our brains are like time travelers. Our brains have one role, and that's to keep us alive. It doesn't necessarily need to keep us comfortable, but it needs to keep us alive. And so and I say time traveler because I can have an experience, or we can talk about experience and say, do you remember when you had your beautiful baby daughter and you're holding your baby in your arms and breastfeeding that beautiful baby for the first time, and feeling that her look into your eyes and using that language? it can take you back to those moments. If you indeed had a daughter, that it can take you to that moment of love, and that your body would release the oxytocin, your brain would release the oxytocin. You would feel that love and that warmth and that memory, and put a smile on your face of just what a beautiful experience that is, because your body is releasing chemicals as if it's happening in real time. Well, that can happen as well when I say, remember that car accident, and they saw that red truck coming at you, and they ran through the stoplight and hit you on impact, and you remember the glass flying and then the sirens and seeing the blood on the ground and all of that. Well, it would dysregulate your system immensely to relive that. And again, you would be time traveling back to that experience. And if you had the right markers to mark that, your blood pressure would raise, your heart rate would increase, you would immediately have that all sensory awareness. People, all of a sudden, there's a rush of energy to the limbs because our fight or flight is activated, and we have to either run, fight, or hide. And so our amygdala is on high response. Well, that happens to us all every single day, and we're not really aware of that or paying attention to the fact we're on social media and we're having all of this influx of stuff and watching a scary movie, or we have that fight with the boss and our spouse is yelling at us because why isn't dinner ready, and the kids are crying and homework isn't done, and we feel worried about the debt and how are you going to come up with the mortgage and the holidays, and we have stress of a loss. Each one of these things are contributing to our brain and body dysregulation. And so our brain is all, emotions are stored in the body. It's actually stored in the fascia of the body. And our brains are compartmentalizing these experiences, and it will often manifest as a physical ailment. And so we look at today's world, an autoimmune identification. There's new autoimmunes all of the time. And really what autoimmune just means is we don't have an understanding of why this is, but they've said, it's often said autoimmune is your body attacking itself. I personally think, and I may get some backlash, and that's okay. God's design is better than that. And our body is never going to attack itself. It's God's design. And so is our body responding to something? For sure. And often in that response, in that healing phase, it will show symptoms. And an autoimmune label is going to be under these specific symptoms, have this level of response to the body, and this is the label we're going to give that. But if we ask anybody, they really don't know. And so I think it's fair to say that it's still up for evaluation, but I write about that in my book about autoimmune, because if we take the stance that our body is attacking ourselves, we've already lost the battle. And I think that we have to take a look at this differently. There is opportunity there. There is definitely wisdom that the body is sending signals, and those signals may be crossed. Those signals may be a jarbled thing because of some kind of event that happened in our past that has locked us into a specific memory or in our subconscious. But if we change our language and our perspective about that and recognize that we actually always do receive the insight and the wisdom if we're paying attention. And if somebody is in bed at this moment and they're listening to this message and they may be feeling a lot of pain, if they close their eyes and they say, and where do I see myself? Where do I see myself in a year? Where do I see myself in 2 weeks? An image is going to appear. And I know that there are people that image could appear and they don't see themselves in the physical body anymore. They see that surrender has taken place, that a breakdown of the body. And some people may be happy for that. They're heavy life, and they're ready to set it all down. And other people may feel hopeful, and they may still see themselves in a real struggle. Uniquely for me, even in my very darkest days in bed and excruciating pain, when I closed my eyes, I always saw myself on top of a mountain with my arms outstretched, and I had arrived. And I knew that was going to happen, and I needed to hold that vision so that I could know that there was always going to be a dangling carrot of hope that was going to appear for me, and that I was going to get on the other side of that. I didn't know the journey was going to be as long as it was. I certainly didn't know that it was going to be as hard as it was, but I also learned an enormous amount about what I'm capable of, and received an enormous amount of wisdom and guidance as I was on that path, for sure.
You mentioned that if the healing isn't necessarily a physical healing that's required, it's more energetic. In what shape could that energetic healing take place?
I think for me, that means a shift of perspective and consciousness. So it will manifest in the physical level based upon conscious, but when we go through immense challenges, one of the other techniques. So I'm a certified EFT practitioner using tapping, and healing always the primary opportunity for healing isn't that the event itself changed. It wasn't that the event itself didn't take place. It's that our perception of the event shifted. And so whether we saw that somebody came in and there was this really upsetting exchange of energy and yelling, and somebody was throwing things, and it was very traumatic because you were feared that somebody was going to hit, I'm just using it as an example. So we could get really, say for instance, dad comes home and he beats us, and we have a lot of trauma about that. And so years later, we're afraid of men, and a man, hear a loud voice, or you hear the door shut, and our senses, our subconscious is going to have these micro alerts, because it's so stored in our memory of that whole experience of how when dad would come home, we would have that experience. But in the perception shift, we understand we can probably widen the lens and go, oh, my dad was responding because that was the direction that his dad responded to him. And he was under an enormous amount of stress. And we start looking at the vulnerability of the man who used to be a child that is still hurting inside there. And his fear about how I may grow up and be a specific way, that he is afraid of that, or his fear of his world, and that his lack of resources and ability to regulate his own nervous system caused him to make decisions, and then the shame spiral that he went into, and then he goes into addiction. So we can go into all these narratives and stories, but it breeds compassion, it breeds empathy, it breeds a broader understanding. It doesn't make the experience right or wrong. It's just an observation that this was an experience, painful indeed, and yet we can understand that ultimately each one of us is all doing the best we can with the resources and information that we have. And when we bring out that empathy and compassion for the bigger picture and recognize, wow, that was really painful, but it made me a better parent. It made me choose not to do that. It gave me the opportunity to push beyond that limitation that my father instilled on me. It made me stand up for myself and defend myself in other experiences. We can look at it as a gift, as an opportunity for growth. And when we just acknowledge that little bit of a shift, it drops the intensity of the pain. It drops the intensity where we have to lock into
That is so important. I do believe that your perspective is your reality. So if you're perceiving pain, then that's what you're going to feel is pain.
Our brain says, oh, we can't ever have that experience again. We've got to protect ourselves. Once we have that understanding, the brain's like, oh, it's taken care of. I have a deeper understanding, and it drops out of the consciousness. So we can reflect back out of it into awareness without having an emotional charge.
Yeah, I like the way you explained that. Okay, so you've now healed, and how are you doing now physically as we sit today?
From the 2012 experience, I I've recovered from all of the food allergies, which was very great, except for gluten. So I would be classified as celiac, and I know that an allergy can appear at any time into adulthood. Seasonal allergies or food reactions. That's a very common thing. And so I would just want to say a caveat: if somebody still is struggling and they have these bloating and they don't feel well and their joint pain, maybe look into having a food test. And otherwise, I'm doing really well.
Okay, so Vicky, if people wanted to get hold of you, are you doing regressions? Are you doing any work at the moment?
Yes. So
This was a really fascinating near-death experience. Thank you for saving space and spending some time with me. Tonight's story wasn't just about death. It was about what it means to truly be alive. Thank you for walking this journey with me, soul travelers. If this video touched your heart, helped you heal, or gave you a new perspective, share your thoughts below. I read them all. I'm Janae of Living Truth, and until next time, don't wait for loss to remind you how precious this life really is.